Folk forms, how to read the hearts and souls of all things. What we're looking at today is all the elements that converge to form a distinct individual. They come together and create this pattern, this image, this archetypal form, the folk form in this case. Archetypes are very much like a prism. When you shine light into a prism, it scatters the light into its spectral colors. So when there's an archetype, when we have one of these folk forms, we can also use the same process, this reverse engineering that allows us to see the individual elements that, when converged, created that folk form in the first place. Things like the nervous system, emotions, the microbiome, and these archetypal phenotypes. In the later end of the video, we'll look at examples of different folk forms, different animals, mythic creatures, and folklore entities, and using celebrity examples to see how they fit these folk forms. So if you want to skip to that part, because it may be easier to see the examples and then go through the explanation, you certainly can. I'll just be going through the slideshow in order with the explanation and then the examples at the end. But you certainly don't have to view it that way. And there's also a link of this slideshow in the description. So if you'd rather just look at that, you don't even have to watch the video. But I may say things that, or extrapolate, or expand on things that may not necessarily be in the slideshow. That being said, the interplay of archetypes, phenotypes, microbiomes, and the nervous system. The human experience is a complex tapestry woven from myriad threads. Among these are the intricate relationships between our archetypal patterns, physical manifestations, microbial ecosystems, and neurological processes. By exploring these connections, we can gain profound insights into the nature of consciousness, behavior, and identity. Archetypes, universal symbolic representations of experiences, serve as foundational blueprints for our psychological and spiritual landscape. These primordial images, rooted in the universal collective unconscious, influence our perceptions, emotions, and behaviors. Phenotypes are the observable physical characteristics of an organism. They're shaped in part by these archetypal patterns. Our bodies, in a sense, are the physical manifestations of our inner archetypal worlds. The nervous system acts as a conductor, orchestrating the intricate dance between archetypes and phenotypes. It processes sensory information, regulates bodily functions, and facilitates our interactions with the environment. Through neural pathways and neurotransmitter activity, the nervous system translates archetypal impulses into physical expressions. The microbiome, the community of microorganisms residing within our bodies, plays a surprising role in this intricate interplay. Emerging research suggests a profound connection between the gut microbiome and brain function, influencing mood, behavior, and cognitive processes. It is conceivable that different archetypal patterns may be associated with distinct microbiome profiles, further shaping our physical and psychological makeup. Morphogenetic fields, as proposed by Rupert Sheldrake, offer a potential framework for understanding the relationship between archetypes and physical form. These fields, acting as organizing principles, influence the development and growth of organisms. In the context of archetypes, morphogenetic fields could be seen as the energetic blueprints that shape both our physical and psychological characteristics. The interplay between archetypes, phenotypes, microbiomes, and the nervous system is a dynamic and multifaceted process. It is a dance of nature and nurture where our genetic inheritance, environmental influences, and conscious choices converge to create the unique individuals that we become. This understanding has profound implications for various fields. It offers new perspectives on personal growth, healing, and the nature of consciousness. The bidirectional dance, archetypes, phenotypes, microbiomes, and the nervous system. The intricate relationship between archetypes, phenotypes, microbiomes, and the nervous system is not a one-way street. Instead, it's a dynamic interplay, with each element influencing and being influenced by the others in a complex feedback loop. Archetypes, the primordial patterns underlying psychology, not only shape our physical form, the phenotypes, but are also shaped by it. For instance, a person with a strong athletic build may be more inclined to embody the hero archetype, while someone with a nurturing demeanor may gravitate towards the caregiver archetype. This bidirectional relationship is evident in the constant negotiation between our inner psychological landscape and our external physical manifestation. The microbiome, often overlooked, plays a pivotal role in this. Research has illuminated the gut-brain axis, highlighting the profound connection between intestinal bacteria and neurological processes. Our microbial inhabitants not only influence our physical health, but also modulate our mood, behavior, and cognitive functions. In turn, our psychological states, shaped by archetypal patterns, can influence the composition and activity of our microbiome. For example, chronic stress associated with certain archetypes, like the caregiver under immense pressure, can disrupt the microbiome, potentially leading to physical and psychological imbalances. The nervous system, as the conductor in this intricate symphony, it receives sensory input from the body, processes information, and sends signals to muscles and organs. The brain, in particular, is the seat of consciousness and the interpreter of archetypal patterns. Our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, influenced by archetypes, are translated into neural impulses that shape our physical expressions and experiences. Conversely, sensory feedback from the body, mediated by the nervous system, can modify archetypal manifestations. This bidirectional relationship is further complicated by the concept of morphogenetic fields. These fields are hypothesized to organize biological systems and influence their development. In the context of archetypes, these fields are not static, they are influenced by the individual's experiences and the collective consciousness, creating a dynamic interplay between the inner and outer worlds. The human face and body as a projection of the nervous system, influenced by microbes and representing archetypal forms. The human face and body are not merely physical structures, but delicate expressions of our inner selves. They are projections of the nervous system, shaped by our influence of microbes and embodying archetypal forms. The nervous system, the complex network of neurons and synapses, is the conductor of our physical and mental experiences. It processes sensory information, regulates bodily functions, and orchestrates our movements and behaviors. The face, with its expressive features, is a direct reflection of the nervous system's activity. The combination of muscles controlled by neural impulses allows us to convey a vast array of emotions, from joy to sorrow, anger to surprise. When you're thinking of something funny or you hear something funny, you tend to smile. Or when you're happy, you tend to smile. When you're angry, you will have a more grim expression. The body is the interface and projection of the inner manifestation of what is received from outer experience. Microbes also play a role in shaping our physical form. The microbiome, the collective genome of these microbes, influences our immune system, digestion, and even brain function. Certain microbes have been linked to specific personality traits and behaviors. For example, studies have shown that individuals with higher levels of certain gut bacteria tend to be more resilient to stress. There's a lot of reiteration in these slides because at every step in the way, I'm trying to reinforce these concepts without losing sight of the whole picture. Each point we go to, we're understanding the previous point and how it relates to the next point. So that's why there may be a lot of rephrasing and reiteration of the same things. The human face and body also embody archetypal forms, universal symbols that represent fundamental universal experiences. These archetypes, rooted in the collective unconscious, influence our physical appearance, personality, and behavior. Someone with a strong jawline and determined expression may embody the warrior archetype. Someone with a nurturing smile and soft features may embody the caretaker archetype. The interplay between the nervous system, microbes, and archetypes creates a complex organizing principle that shapes our physical form and our identity. Our faces and bodies are not merely passive structures, but active participants in our experiences. They are constantly changing and evolving in responses to our thoughts, emotions, and interactions with the world around us. The human face and body are expressions of our inner selves. They are projections of the nervous system, shaped by the influence of microbes and embodying archetypal forms. The cooperation between these elements creates a complex and dynamic exchange that shapes our physical form and our identity. Each of these spectral elements that we're looking at, they shape the other elements, even as they are shaped by other elements, and still all the while converging into this total form. The sum, we'll see that the sum is greater than the parts because it gives us a way we can connect these dots. So pattern-seeking brain versus shape-forming pattern. On one hand, the brain is considered to be pattern-seeking. This is how most people view the human brain, is that it's a pattern-seeking device, essentially. And this is self-confirmed within the philosophical outlook of rigid and random taxonomy. The brain is thought to be pattern seeking because no pattern exists outside of its perception and cognitive recognition of the pattern. They'll say that nothing is related, it's all random chaos, but because our brains like to organize and look for patterns, that we create those patterns in our mind. However, if this is true, animals would undeniably all be the same within a taxonomy. An owner of two dogs of the same breed will notice distinct personality differences, which may be comparable to the personality of two human friends. Right? How often do we have people say that this person's like a golden retriever, or this person's like a chihuahua, or this person behaves like a cat, or your cat behaves like this person? The former explanation considers this to be a projection. The latter says that the shape of the dog and human are alike, and therefore are comparable to as being alike. They look and act in ways which resemble a pattern both express. There is a shape underlying them. The convergence of these elements in the ways that they manifest are archetypal to each other. Intrinsic geometry. This is something we'll go over in more detail in another video. But this is why people think it's that we're a pattern-seeking brain. Because the brain is not actually making up patterns, it is seeing patterns which exist intrinsically that are inherent in all systems. Brain activity is not simply a product of its connections, but it is also a consequence of its intrinsic geometry. Because organizing principles like neural geometry, morphic fields, the microbiome, the CNS, they're not limited by the function of its connections. They can subsist across every angle of nature. This means that forms that resemble may indeed have similar intrinsic geometries that are outwardly expressed in the interface of shape and behavior or personality. Again, like a dog and human who share in comparable looks and behavior. The intrinsic geometry of a person who thinks that we're making up the patterns, that is simply how their intrinsic geometry works. This is the lens, the prism from which they view things, from which they process information. It's simply been wired to say that nothing is connected, only that which we see is connected. The intrinsic geometry is this organizing principle in which its geometry forms the shape. It's the shape forming the pattern. We'll get into that more in a little bit. Physical features in the nervous system. While physical features aren't direct projections of the nervous system, they are undeniably influenced by it. The neural control of development. The nervous system plays a crucial role in embryonic development, influencing the growth and formation of physical features. The musculoskeletal system. Physical features like muscle tone, posture, and facial expressions are directly controlled by the nervous system. Sensory feedback. The nervous system receives constant sensory input from physical features such as touch, pressure, and pain, which influences behavior and perception. Hormonal regulation. The nervous system interacts with the endocrine system, which influences physical growth, development, and appearance. While skin isn't a direct projection of the nervous system, there's a close and complex relationship between the two. Sensory receptors. The skin is densely packed with sensory receptors that detect touch, pressure, temperature, and pain. These receptors are part of the peripheral nervous system and send signals to the brain for processing. The autonomic nervous system. The ANS regulates various involuntary bodily functions, including blood flow to the skin, sweating, and hair follicle activity. This plays a crucial role in temperature regulation and emotional responses. Right? It's kind of like if someone is blushing, it's blood going to this certain part of the face that represents the emotion that someone is feeling. It's a interface of this inner experience, which is projected or manifested through their physical form. Neurotransmitters and hormones. The skin produces and responds to neurotransmitters and hormones, which are also involved in nervous system function. There's certain signs of different levels of hormones that help to shape the face, which means those shapes are reflecting that hormonal state. The skin is a sensory organ. In a sense, the skin can be considered a vast sensory organ, providing constant input to the nervous system about the external environment, and vice versa. It's providing constant information about the internal environment. It's an interface. How the microbiome influences personality. There's the gut-brain axis, the neurotransmitter production, inflammation. The microbiome can influence inflammation levels, which can impact brain function and behavior. Chronic inflammation has been linked to various mental health conditions. Immune system modulation. The microbiome interacts with the immune system, which can affect brain development and function. Some specific links to personality traits. Sociability. People with more diverse gut microbiomes tend to be more sociable. Neuroticism. Lower gut microbial diversity has been associated with higher levels of neuroticism, like anxiety and moodiness. The gut-brain axis and neurotransmitters. One of the most fascinating aspects of the gut microbiome relationship is the product of neurotransmitters. These chemical messengers are typically associated with the brain, but many are also produced in the gut. The serotonin, dopamine, and GABA. There's also the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is a vital link between the gut and the brain. It carries signals in both directions, allowing for communication between the two. Microbes can influence vagus nerve activity, impacting digestion, inflammation, and even mood. The role of short-chain fatty acids. Microbes in the gut produce short-chain fatty acids as a byproduct of fiber fermentation. These fatty acids have a profound impact in the gut-brain axis. Anti-inflammatory effects, blood-brain barrier integrity, and neurogenesis, which is the ability to grow and develop new brain cells. Microbes and gut disorders. The relationship between microbes and the gut nervous system, also called the enteric nervous system, is increasingly implicated in various gut disorders, IBS, IBD, and functional gastrointestinal disorders. Conditions like functional dyspepsia and bloating may be influenced by the gut microbiome and its interaction with the enteric nervous system. A hypothetical link: microbiome, nervous system, and archetypal personality. The hypothetical pathway. So this is a list of the possible framework for how the microbiome might indirectly shape personality archetypes through its influence on the nervous system. The microbiome gut-brain axis, neurotransmitter modulation, brain development and plasticity, immune system regulation, and personality formation. The combined effects of neurotransmitter modulation, brain development, and immune system regulation could contribute to the formation of personality traits. For instance, a microbiome that promotes higher serotonin levels might correlate with individuals exhibiting more extroverted tendencies. Heart and soul. Heart and soul are often used to implicate one's unifying essence that exists beyond its taxonomy or biology. That is to say, the sum of all the parts that make an individual distinct and self-operating, provided a unique signature of being, one which may resemble others in form or frame. An archetype represents an aspect of the heart or soul of a person, one which is noticeable through all the previously described interplays. Every line in existence has a reason, and those lines come together to create a form. Every wrinkle, groove, muscle, tone, contour, bone, protein, collagen, fold, ridge, crease, scar, every smooth surface, every flush. The lines can be reverse engineered to their archetypal origin and subsequent formation. This is done largely unconscious by means of one's impression of another, the sense of their soul or heart, which archetypally unite in co-creating body language, sociality, and empathy. For example, let's say an orphan child and a cat living in an alley together will have more in common with each other by means of situation, the microbiome, the nervous system response, the past and present, and so on, their life experiences. They have more in common between each other than they would with a wealthy man and his cat. Despite sharing in taxonomy, the biological explanation does little to explain the scope of the individual, their experiences, and everything that comprises how they are, the heart and soul. Archetypes, physiognomy, and the mind-body connection. Mythological and folklore archetypes are rooted in a universal natural physiognomy, influenced by a bidirectional relationship between the microbiome, personality, nervous system, and physical traits, the mind-body connection. Universal physiognomy. There exists a common underlying physical structure or appearance shared across species, forming a basis for archetypal representations. These are the intrinsic geometries inherent in every organizing system. Bidirectional influence. The mind, personality, the nervous system, the microbiome shapes the body, the physical traits, and vice versa, creating a cyclical influence. Archetypal manifestation. These physical and psychological factors converge to form the archetypal patterns found in mythology and folklore. Comparative anatomy and physiology. Examining physical similarities across species to identify potential universal physiognomic features. Cross-cultural archetypal analysis. Comparing archetypes from different cultures to find commonalities in physical descriptions and associated personality traits. Neurobiological correlates of personality. Investigating how brain structure and function might relate to both personality and physical appearance. Microbiome personality phenotype studies. Exploring the potential role of the microbiome in shaping both personality and physical traits. So these are all different ways we can look at the archetypes and the mind-body connection. By shifting our focus from taxonomic classifications to archetypal phenotype forms or folk forms, we open up new avenues for exploring the intricate relationship between physical appearance, behavior, and underlying psychological structures. Traditional species distinctions may become less rigid as we recognize overlapping archetypal and phenotypic characteristics across different organisms. An expanded understanding of behavior. Observing behavior through an archetypal lens can provide insights into motivations, desires, and social interactions that might be missed with a purely taxonomic approach. New avenues for research. Exploring the interplay between archetypes, phenotypes, and microbiomes could lead to groundbreaking discoveries about the origins and evolution of life. Some potential challenges and considerations. Identifying archetypal phenotype forms can be subjective and influenced by cultural and personal biases. That is true. The interplay between archetypes, phenotypes, and microbiomes is likely to be highly complex and difficult to isolate. This perspective raises questions about how we categorize and treat different life forms. Modern taxonomy imposes a judgment-based society, one which something like the rat is considered negative, as is a spider, mosquito, cockroach, a hyena, a snake, a vulture, and so on. Therefore, a person described as such, or saying they are embodying that sort of animal, is borrowing the negative connotation of the taxonomic approach to make moral judgments. Because we categorize animals through our use or our taste of them, which is sometimes literal, we do not eat dogs or cats as those are seen as pets. Yet we eat pigs, which are also seen as pets for some people and closer to human flesh, which is the reason why we don't eat humans. The taxonomic system has inherent biases because it ranks and puts things into hierarchy. If someone says, oh, this person embodies a rat, that's only an insult because we consider rats to be the lowest of the low. There's a moral judgment inherent in taxonomy. We'll get into that more in a little bit here. Areas for further exploration. Creating a taxonomy based on archetypal phenotype forms would require careful deconstruction of defining criteria and hierarchical structures. Analyzing similarities and differences in archetypal phenotype forms across different species could reveal underlying evolutionary patterns. It's that intrinsic geometry forming the patterns, forming the archetypes that exist across species, and also exploring the implications of this perspective for human psychology, sociology, and culture. This is an intuitive and heuristic approach to understanding the natural world. By moving beyond traditional taxonomic boundaries, we can gain new insights into the subjectivity of all living things. A better approach to interacting with the natural world. By proposing a system that acknowledges differences without assigning moral value, it challenges the anthropocentric biases inherent in many traditional classification systems. Each individual animal, not species, but the individual animal, may exhibit an archetype of another species. That's lost in modern taxonomy. People might say, oh, my cat acts more like a dog. What you say is you're just making up that connection, but indeed there could be an intrinsic reason for that. These archetypes are personalized to an individual, and it's not limited by taxonomy. A moral neutral framework would necessitate a reevaluation of ethical principles and practices related to human-animal interactions, environmental conservation, and biotechnology. By removing moral biases, scientists could approach research with a more objective and comprehensive perspective, potentially leading to new discoveries and innovations. Animal intelligence is a huge debate in biology. The bias, the frame, the intrinsic geometry that science looks is saying that animals aren't intelligent unless proven otherwise. However, if we remove that hierarchical taxonomic bias and the moral judgment that we apply to that, to saying these animals are lesser because they're not intelligent, but we can understand them as being intelligent and being their own subjective experiences, and we can study it that way rather than running torturous tests on them because we don't assign any value to them, right? Like all the rats and mice that we do experiments on because we don't view them as being anything but the bottom of the barrel, that bottom of the hierarchy of life. Adopting a moral neutral stance would require significant shifts in societal attitudes and values, challenging anthropocentric worldviews. By recognizing the inherent value of all life forms without hierarchical rankings, we would we could foster greater empathy and compassion. A moral neutral perspective could promote more sustainable and harmonious relationships between humans and the natural world. Removing moral biases could open up new avenues for scientific exploration and multidisciplinary collaboration. When is the last time a philosopher or a poet or a monk worked on animal intelligence? Right? We've divided into these different fields of study and we don't cross those boundaries. We keep people in the same lane and never break out of these social structures and these hierarchical principles that they use to inform everyone else across fields. Say, this is the way it is because this is the way my intrinsic geometry views these things, which has largely been used to put down other people, put down other life forms, and essentially abuse the natural world because it's seen as a lower moral significance. The nervous system, emotions, and archetypal phenotypes. Emotions as external projections. Emotional states are expressed through physical manifestations like facial expressions, posture, and vocal tone. The nervous system orchestrates these expressions by regulating muscle movements, hormone release, and other physiological responses. Over time, consistent emotional patterns and their corresponding physical expressions can contribute to the development of archetypal phenotypes. The relationship between internal emotional states and external physical manifestations is bidirectional, with each influencing the other. So again, just reiterating and kind of summarizing the past slides. This perspective suggests a complex interplay between genetic predispositions and environmental influences in shaping archetypal phenotypes. Cultural norms and expectations can influence the expression and interpretation of emotions and physical features, contributing to the diversity of archetypes. The microbiome, as a modulator of the nervous system, might also play a role in shaping emotional responses and, consequently, archetypal phenotypes. Analyzing how different archetypes might be linked to particular emotional patterns. And each of these areas has ways of looking further into them, of exploring them deeper. Analyzing how different archetypes might be linked to particular emotional patterns and physical characteristics. Investigating how cultural differences influence the expression and interpretation of archetypes. Exploring the neural mechanisms underlying the connection between emotions and physical manifestations. Considering how understanding the relationship between emotions and physical appearance and archetypes can inform therapeutic approaches. Animal forms and archetypal phenotypes. Archetypes are universal symbols or patterns that represent basic human and animal motivations and experiences. They are often found in mythology, folklore, and religion. Phenotypes are the observable physical characteristics of an organism, such as its shape, size, and color. The relationship between archetypes and phenotypes is complex and multifaceted. On the one hand, archetypes can influence the development of physical characteristics. The hero archetype is often associated with strength and courage and determination, which may manifest in physical characteristics such as a strong build and a determined expression. On the other hand, physical characteristics can influence the development of archetypes. A person with a strong build and a determined expression may be more likely to develop the hero archetype. The nervous system and microbiome also play a role in the relationship between archetypes and phenotypes. The nervous system regulates the body's response to stimuli, and the microbiome influences the development of the immune system and the brain. Both of these factors can affect physical characteristics and behavior, which in turn can influence the development of archetypes. Rupert Sheldrake's concept of morphogenetic fields suggests that there are organizing principles that shape the development of biological organisms. These fields could be considered analogous to archetypal forms, influencing the physical manifestation of an organism while also being influenced by it. Viewing archetypes as morphogenetic fields provides a framework for understanding how underlying psychological patterns shape physical form. The archetype acts as a blueprint, guiding the development of the organism's physical and behavioral characteristics. The hero archetype, the essence of heroism, courage, determination, and self-sacrifice, could be seen as a morphogenetic field influencing the development of a strong, athletic physique and a confident demeanor. The nurturing and compassionate essence of the caregiver archetype might influence the development of a soft, nurturing physical appearance and a gentle demeanor. The playful and adaptable nature of the trickster could shape a physical form that is agile, expressive, and perhaps unconventional. The limitations of taxonomy. Taxonomy has a fundamental shortcoming, which is that the categorization through biology and genetics provides a weak basis for knowing a life form. It tends to suggest something along the lines of every organism is the same, except for humans, which they're allowed to be individually unique. And yet very often people may embody animal, mythic, or archetypal forms which are not commensurable with taxonomy, such as with forms that aren't on the list of living biological entities but exist as archetypes, like a dragon, a unicorn, or a siren. The flaws of taxonomy get further highlighted by the fact most every organism has 2 to 3 other organisms from different kingdoms living inside, which are essential for that host to exist. What follows may appear convoluted, but in reality is much less so than the classification system, which has 8 levels just to describe something that may behave completely outside expectation that such a system implies. Archetypes may exist on several levels: the microbiome, the personality, the nervous system, morphic field, physical projection. Right, so we have these classifications of the domain, the kingdom, the phylum, the class, the order, family, genus, and species. But that doesn't tell you anything about its role in an ecosystem or in a community. It doesn't tell you the job it occupies, the class of it, the personality, the intentions, the dreams, the flaws. Nothing about taxonomy gives you information outside of this strict hierarchical moral bias. Because we do not have to be limited by rigid taxonomy, nor even expect the universal language of archetypes, instead, we can draw from elements of intrinsic shapes that an individual may exhibit, different from a fellow individual. The result is personal relationships with all forms: animal, plant, microbe, even unliving forms may resemble archetypes, which are folk. Imagine archetypes are folk. They are people. And you could know, name, think of, categorize, and dissociate the definite elements of the folk that you recognize and interact with in the way that you believe. The relationship with the folk in your life. Your lens, the prism in which you see, that intrinsic geometry, that is how you see things. And so that is your relationship to folk, to the people in the experience that you have in this world. All the different archetypes of each individual you experience, the interplay of your interface with the interface of all these other living entities. Those aspects of the folk interplaying with you could be the nervous system of the folk, the microbes, the behavior, the appearance, or even the overall feel, which is that idea of the heart and the soul of something. Archetypes within archetypes. This is a hypothetical organization of layering multiple persona systems for an individual, regardless of taxonomy. So for every single individual organism, you could look at its temperaments, its MBTI or Enneagram, or a different kind of personality assessments. You have the folk form, which we're about to get into, the astrological chart, the emotional type, the I Ching physiognomy that I've done in the past. You have the signature of one of these distinct aspects. You have its career or skill, its sort of class or job, and as well as just having the broad archetype. And none of these are better or worse than the other. They don't imply any judgment. They are simply ways of understanding something outside of taxonomy that can be applied to any organism. If we're imagining each being as having its own tapestry, and in that tapestry are dots, there are points of interest or points of distinction, anyone can take a look at that tapestry and draw these imaginary lines, much like with the stars and constellations. So these constellations are the archetypes you recognize in something else. One person maybe sees these lines and it looks like the shape of a lion. Someone else maybe sees more of a sphinx or a wolf, and they may be looking at different lines. Not necessarily all of them are connecting, but you notice the ones that are distinct to you. Through your intrinsic geometry, you see the pattern of constellation in the archetype of the form that you're looking at, of the other person or the other animal that you're seeing, or even just a non-living form. You see the constellation of these spectral elements that, when converged, form something greater than the whole. Each one of those points, if you were to look up too close, doesn't tell you much about the totality of an organism or a person. But when you look at these things separately, you can see them as the pattern that you form, and that multiple people may have these similar constellations as each other, even though it's organized differently. You can have a constellation of a tiger that is aggressive and looks like it's roaring in someone, but someone else may also resemble a tiger, but it may be more relaxed and lounging. But each can exhibit the folk form of a tiger. This is the last slide before we get into examples of the folk form with different celebrities. Animal forms and archetypal phenotypes. The multifaceted relationship. It's important to note that this is a sprawling relationship. The morphogenetic field, or the archetype, influences the physical form, but the physical form also provides feedback to the morphogenetic field. For example, physical experiences and challenges can shape the expression of an archetype. Archetypes are not constrained to a single dimension of taxonomy, like animal classifications. One archetype may occupy several elements of the form being described, and another archetype may describe other elements of the same form. Some of those elements can even overlap and represent a different perspective of identification, so that there are hybrid archetypes and meta-archetypes and multi-dimensional archetypes across the many systems of organization, that which contains intrinsic geometry whose shape forms the pattern or archetype, such as the microbiome, the CNS, physical manifestations, the morphogenetic field, mental projections, personality traits, characteristics, etc. In conclusion, this perspective suggests a deeper connection between the mind and body, where psychological and spiritual factors actively participate in the creation of a physical form. It also raises questions about the nature of consciousness, free will, and the potential for human transformation. You look how you act and act how you look. They shape and form each other. It is perhaps a spiritual successor, or sort of metaphysical Lamarckism, with Jungian and morphogenetic resonance influences and animism and mythology, not from a genetic standpoint, not from rigid taxonomy, but as universal archetypal geometries that project their qualities of the shape they are formed into. That probably sounds confusing, so let's look at some examples. Here we have this folk form, the stag. Overall, we have the archetype, the morphogenetic field, the physical manifestation, the microbiome, personality traits, and nervous system. These are the spectral elements that, when we see the folk form of, in this case, the stag, these spectral elements are what converge to form that archetype of the stag. And this is the heart and soul of these various celebrities that I've chosen as examples. Keep in mind, the folk forms, this is just the way my intrinsic geometry works. When I see these people, this is the impression of their hearts, their soul, that I get when I look at them and the roles that they have and the way that they behave and the way that they look. And again, there's no moral judgment because there's no animal, mythic beast, or folklore creature that is morally superior or morally inferior to the other. This is just the sense that I get. And my intrinsic geometry is shaped by the things that I'm interested in, which is archetypes and folklore and mythology and psychoanalysis and microbiology and just physical expressions of mental traits. These people, for the stag archetype, they have a very vertical posture. Doesn't necessarily mean they're tall. They have a sort of very proud and large presence. It's very commanding and elusive, but also tends to suffer in urban or populated environments. These celebrities, they give off this idea of the mysterious stag in the middle of the forest. They're enigmatic and they're powerful and they're almost guardian or territorial forms of a particular area. And those are the roles that they usually occupy in their arts, or the ones that they express, that they manifest or are manifested by this archetype. Next, we have the salmon, the transmuter and the journeyer archetypes. Transformation, perseverance, endurance, connection to water, should be very mercurial. They tend to have smooth bodies, balanced musculature, sleek facial symmetry. It's kind and soft features, but they seem hardened by trial. Very adapted to travel and a robust immune system. They're resilient, adaptive, instinctual, and social. They have a good sense of things and they can move through society as if it was water. And their faces reflect this sort of salmon archetype. This is the folk form of the alien, the other, the extraterrestrial. They have a very unique separateness, a lot of mystery and intelligence, adaptation and exploration of new themes. They have varied and often bizarre body structures that seem to be adapted to a variety of environments, almost cartoonish features, but they have this sort of critically aware and knowledgeable sense. They look very futuristic, driven to explore and survive, and a seemingly supernatural presence to them. Their nervous system seems to pick up on things and projects things which are more supernatural, ethereal, or strange, mysterious. They embody that thrilling unknown. The fox archetype, the trickster and the opportunist. They're quick-witted, they're crafty, they're charming, they have a strong intuition, and they have narrow features and very distinct hair. They're adaptable and curious, playful, independent, cunning, resourceful, shrewd, but they have very reactive nervous systems. They're ready for an outburst or to have a fight or flight response, right? Almost skittish in some sense, or ready to bar their fangs. So they're wily and they're opportunistic. The folk form, the heart and soul of these actors or celebrities, they tend to embody that in their different roles. They are very fox-like in their manifestation of themselves. You have the owl, the teacher, the observer. They have large eyes, prominent brow, contemplative posture. They have heavy features, as if thoughts are constantly weighing them down. They have a soft demeanor, but can still lash out, as if they had these strong talents. There's a lot of wisdom, knowledge, intuition, as well as silence. Deep thinkers, nocturnal and observant, solitary, sometimes aloof, sometimes separate from society. They're always taking a good vantage point. They're very grounding force. Very much have that old soul or old man essence to them. The fairy, the fae, or the enchanter. They usually have small, delicate features. They're mischievous, flirtatious, and wily, almost innocent and childlike. They're very zany, dreamy, even delusional, creative. They tend to notice details and enjoy randomness and chaos. Very connected to the natural world and a strong connection to their intuition, almost to the point of having psychic or magical abilities. They can read the nervous system of others. They can pick up on what people are not saying, what people aren't expressing. So they have a playful and mischievous approach to what isn't usually explained, to the sort of spiritual or hidden aspects of reality, but they're able to bring those out and kind of present them in that playful or mischievous way. The phoenix, the archetypes are the arisen or the immortal. There's a lot of rebirth and transformation, immortality and power. You usually have fiery features, volatile expressions. They have a hawk-like appearance, but serene at rest. A very predatory gaze, but not necessarily malicious. It's more piercing or thrilling. They're able to bounce back from a lot, and a very sort of inflammatory microbiome. Prevents sickness, but is very draining overall. They're very keen and discerning with a lot of deadly precision that cuts through the inane. They're able to conjure this motivation with their fiery passion, and they bring that energy to those around them. They're kind of focusing that inner fire for whatever they are applying themselves to. The spider, the creator, the assassin. They're all about weaving plans. They're secretive, dark, poisonous, vicious but reclusive, a lot of orchestrating. They tend to have unsuspecting eyes. It's difficult to place or conceive of. You can't really see or catch their expressions. They're plotting behind these covert projections, and their features sort of spread across their face like spider legs. They're patient, solitary, and entrapping, and they usually only make a move if they're sure of their success, but they will take risks if they need to. They like their space, but they constantly have to do something thrilling. They have to be on the hunt for something and then have moments of rest after. The swan archetype, the graceful, the enigmatic, beauty and grace and impeccability, transformation, sort of center of attention, though seemingly unobtainable. They're slender and swarthy with a lot of negative space. The nighttime is strange for them, and a lot of inexplicable experiences that they encounter. They're brazen, but they're self aware and live. They're constantly seeking these transformative experiences, pushing boundaries. And there's this constant struggle with the shadow self, with the night. So you have usually this duality of a white swan or a black swan. They sort of have this darker ego or darker side to them, but whatever turmoil they have, it's handled with grace, and outwardly you may never notice it. The horse, the charger, or the worker, they're mighty, full of endurance, loyalty. There's a sense of freedom and speed. They like to go fast. They usually have a muscular body, strong, well built legs, stocky, good center of gravity. They usually have narrow eyes with a heavier emphasis on the lower mouth or jaw. Well suited for routine and reliable habits with bursts of being able to go long distance. But they need a large pen, they need a large area to be and explore in. They essentially need roaming ground. They like the freedom of a large contained space. They're easygoing but can sprint into action and will be headstrong and unapologetic to whatever they apply themselves to. The unicorn, it's kind of the cryptic counterpart to the horse. The fable influences the development of this sort of odd beauty. You can't necessarily place it, but it's has that same level of majesty, just with an otherworldliness added to it. They have an attractiveness that's almost hard to pinpoint. They're visionary and active in bursts, but it comes and goes, so it's very elusive. They're able to bring out these qualities that are hidden and rare. Emotions are projected much stronger than most. They sort of add a magic element to everything they do. There's something special with their presence and their ability to take the hidden mysteries and show them and reveal them for a short time before disappearing again. The Sphinx is the guardian and the chimera. Wisdom, mystery, a juxtaposition of humor, horror, reliability, and wit. They're easily distracted and have this slow to come around sort of personality. It takes them time to adjust to every situation, but once they get that engine going, they're extremely strong, brilliant, and have this awareness of everything. They've got a human head, a lion's body, bird's wings, a snake's tail. So it's a powerful build, an assortment of distinct features that kind of blend together, round and sharp, as if they were sculpted into a form, but very robust. They tend to be impulsive and sensitive, maybe unexpectedly enigmatic and powerful, very protective and wise, because they are all these elements. They have all these different experiences and perspectives that come together and converge in them. The raven, the messenger, or the watcher archetypes. Intellectual, poetic, supple, mystery, connection to these mysteries and darker realities. They have contrasting features, very gazeful eyes, but a very disinterested and even deceitful look, as if they know more or they're planning more than they let on, integrating information that they see and internalizing it in some way that usually you'll never figure out. Sharp and clever, moody and spiteful. Very good problem solving skills because they're always internalizing everything, they're always analyzing everything. The elk, the archetypes of the hunter or the rogue, quick reflexes and expressive features, and an androgynous or almost ambiguous appearance. Very charismatic and flexible, possesses a strong sense of humor and a dark, sometimes intimidating demeanor. They have these sort of ageless features and sort of vague, transient emotions. You can't really ever tell if they're angry, sad, upset, or happy. They almost look like they're all of them at once. And still containing this agelessness. They tend to only like close companions, but they need a lot of activity, a lot of outdoors and competition. They're always going to bring some level of this boyhood mentality. They're usually a very grounding presence for people, almost larger than life, and they're vicious if they need to be, and overall just not suited for inaction. There's always an adventure or something to be doing, some sort of competition or something to explore. The rat, the gambler or the tactician, influences the physical development of changeable features and a strong connection to people's needs or desires. They're able to read through everyone around them, and they like to make plots and plans and then gamble on those. They can survive on very little for a long time, very chameleon like. They blend in with environment and social hierarchies. They stay in the shadows until an opportunity is available. They can read others very well, often to a fault, as it may provide a false sense of opportunity. They prefer subterfuge over direct confrontation, though will fight if there's a weakness to exploit. Because they're so socially intelligent and are able to find weaknesses and exploit them, they are very valuable partners. They're able to navigate that maze of social interactions better than most. The moth. Here we have the changeling or the surreal archetypes, the themes of the lunar metamorphosis and evolving, twilight and ethereal. They tend to have curious features that both repulse and draw you in. Their emotions are mesmerizing and ephemeral. They have a subtle allure. It tends to have a kind of a poor constitution, as if this heightened thoughtfulness and creativity kind of diminishes their health at the same time. Processing all of these sort of mystery and ephemeral aspects of life and illusory, captivating, and enthralling experiences. And this is almost more than they're able to ever project. So they tend to be very esoteric in their work, but have this sort of command or mastery over their mind. And they're able to channel that into strength or seemingly magical qualities to what they do. The wolf is a loner or the conqueror, a lot of ferocity, dominating presence, undying loyalty, and a very primal stature, a fairly natural build, almost feral and bestial. It's tamed while safe, but wrathful when they're feeling unsafe. They like to stay in their den. They don't like new environments necessarily. It takes them a long time to adjust, and they do the best with some kind of companion or partner. But if their area, their domain, or partner is threatened, they will go on a warpath. The vampire, we have the slayer or the seducer archetypes: seduction, power, darkness, mystery, blood, and sacrifice. They tend to have sallow and clear skin, sharp looking teeth, very striking eyes, and a hidden expression that really only comes out when it's forced to. Other than that, you almost never know what they're thinking. Very stoic looking expression that they're able to shape to whatever they need. And they have their microbiome is very overpowering. It sort of infects the others, and that plays a role in that enthralling and seduction. They seek thrills and pursue mystery. They enjoy the manipulation and sees interactions as a game, but may catch themselves in impossible situations and always ready to fight at the slightest provocation. So they can be very defensive or territorial, with a huge sense of social intelligence that sometimes backfires. The gnome. Here we have the aloof or the earthbound. These themes of earth and nature, protection, this understanding with rustic and handy capabilities, tend to be smaller, stocky build, playful expressions that appears both old and young together, with very flaky features. They enjoy the odd and weird, able to integrate information through digestion and bring it to consciousness. It's kind of this role of being in the underworld or being in the low levels of the ground and kind of tasting and integrating all these different elements, which people usually step over, people usually forget or ignore. So they have an almost scholarly and mercurial personality that can see through these invisible boundaries. They're highly attuned to that supernatural and spiritual side of things while being balanced and grounded. So they're able to bring back these bizarre experiences in a way that's playful, and their physical appearance usually reflects that sort of aloofness, that earthboundness. The orc. Here we have the hellion or the brute. A lot of passion, zeal, power, dominance, even savagery and raw energy. Pronounced features as if molded from clay. And a lot of distinct traits, very stout. Obviously, for here, I'd put Harvey Weinstein just as because he fits the archetype, not because there's anything about the archetype that is bad or judgmental. It's an example of someone whose choices and actions make them a bad person, and not because the archetype includes or imposes on any judgment or morality. They tend to have a very addictive but vigorous constitution. They're brutal and to the point and disregards what's considered proper. They do things their own way. They're unpredictable and aggressive. They're kind of forging their own path and do so with a lot of passion and a lot of disowning of societal norms. The goblin. We have the invisible or the ghoul. Mischief, adaptability, innocence, hardy, and abnormal. They have a small cartoonish appearance, an impish grin, roguish eyes. They have this adaptability in challenging environments and a strange composition of microbes that gives them this sort of sly and tricksy countenance. They're playful, adaptable, and they enjoy the perverse or depraved. But they go where no one else goes, and this often leads them to be misunderstood. They're sort of the darker version of the gnome. The gnome looks for the inexplicable, zany, and fun, while the goblin looks for the darker sides of the inexplicable and brings that back. And this tends to gross people out or make them stigmatized. Of course, there are cases where they go too far and sort of get corrupted or become too much into the abnormality and not able to make it fun and lighthearted, which I think kind of fits the case of Quentin Tarantino in that sense of embodying that goblin archetype so much that it's sort of twisted him into enjoying depravity too much. The chicken, we have the jester or the suave, influences physical development of a strong connection to the earth with a powerful and grounding presence in a form that seeks laughter. Again, very mischievous, but intelligent and humorous. Very precise wit. You can almost see the wit coming off of them. They seem to have a lot of serotonin and dopamine. And if this gets disrupted, though, the fall off can be rough. They like to be involved and bring in an element of chaos and laughter, but they're still capable of being shrewd and volatile. Their strong connection to their mind and body, their calm and centered demeanor can help others be more in that rest and digest phase. They're able to bring that lighthearted earthiness to whatever they do and to the people around them. The bear. We have the caretaker and the survivor. Strength, endurance, hibernation, protection, grounding, ferocity. This robust musculoskeletal body, dense bone structure, thick skin, intimidating yet friendly, powerful arms, and voice. They're capable of digesting anything, even if it takes time, suitable for surviving on very little. The microbiome shares with those around them. They're very empathetic and they're always feeling what others are feeling and integrating what others are integrating. But this protection, they're grounded, patient, resilient, solitary except for family or close companions, mainly uses their strength in defense, very resourceful and very rustic. They have a good sense of danger, of prediction, and an instinct of other people. They look warm and friendly, but there is a ferocity that can be brought out, the strength that they have in the event that they are threatened. The eagle, we have the visionary or the raptor. Height, keen vision, soaring above others, leadership, freedom. They're vicious and discerning. They're what you would call sharp as eagles. Small, compact features, very tall presence, mighty and proud, very pointed. Though fairly weak stamina, as the gut is often neglected for increased nervous activity and processing power. The diet tends to be frugal. They're observant and focused, independent, courageous, strategic. They're canny and often ambitious, sometimes to a fault. Problem solving, and they have an excellent sense and scope of things. They see the bigger and smaller picture simultaneously. They have this bird-like quality to them, and they have this air around them of this authority and being able to see things from a perspective isn't grounded, but that is from a distance. We have the snake, the charmer, or the unkillable. Stealth, predation, regeneration, and transformation. Narrow features but wide face. It's symmetrical and mesmerizing. It fascinates and tempts. So much like a snake, it's deadly, but it's beautiful. It's very charming and elegant and graceful and does things very self-aware of how it appears. It's elusive and it recognizes weaknesses. It's tenacious and can strike without warning, though again, always looks and acts elegantly, and usually in a very poetic or intellectual way. But it's also hedonistic and earthly. The dragon. Here we have kingly and heroic archetypes, power, leadership, agelessness, hoarder, and force of nature. They have durable features, unshakable expressions, a fiery gaze, and a sharp tongue. They have an iron will and tough as nails. They tend to have inflammatory reaction as if they had flame-producing bacteria. Disease resistance, but unable to integrate easily with others, and have a very dominating microbiome. Overshadows anyone else in the room. They command the center of attention, and keeps to themselves usually, sort of in their lair, and lays low unless provoked, and then they unleash all their fury. They have these huge stores of endurance and is often the target or seen as a prize to defeat or conquer because they have this sort of accumulation of wealth and power. Right? It's the archetype of the dragon hoarding all this gold, and someone wants to go and defeat that because they view them as the power to overcome or the leader to be in order to become the best. So they are the target of a lot of jealousy, but they have the endurance to battle with that. The dolphin. We have the siren or the wicked. We have this intelligence, this playfulness, community, communication, adaptation, and evilness. They're fleshy but pristine and smooth. The features sort of glide through, and the angles are rounded. They're steady and consistent and can adapt easily with no noticeable differences. They're calculating, and there's no distinction between play and reality, making for a devastatingly effective social intelligence and influence. They move through society much like a dolphin moves through water. They have this sort of instinctual echolocation. They're just aware of things without needing to really interact with them in any discernible way. And they tend to have a nervous system that overpowers others. It's intimidating because they are this sort of evil presence that enjoys the play of it all. Here we have a different sort of folk form, which is more of a thematic archetype, the witch or the damned. So they deal with death, the unknown, the macabre, and loss. They have friendly features, almost hyper realistic, but even tortured looking. Tends to look very Victorian or tribal, sort of a witch doctor or voodoo. Relaxed but aware. there tend to be this connection to the underworld, which they are attuned to. They have this knowing and powerful presence. They're independent and connected to these darker themes of macabre and death, and they're ostracized or set apart usually. They're generally at rest, but can summon a devastating fight response and go on a war path if they are threatened or if it comes to it. So that's the last example I have, but there could be dozens and dozens or hundreds of others from different animals, different plants, different mythic beasts, and different thematic archetypal forms, different folkloric creatures. But hopefully this was at least interesting. It's a slightly different format with the slideshow, but like I said, you can find the link and look at it. The slideshow is more for an introduction to this as a theory, and not necessarily that this is how it is or how it has to be. It's just an intro to the concept of how things can be seen, and also how I see things with the different folk forms, the different physiognomy, and how those are reflecting the spectral elements that, when converged, have this constellation of the sort of heart and soul of something. And when I see these different celebrities, if I'm watching TV or a movie or just seeing people out in the world, I tend to see them through this prism, this lens, that intrinsic geometry. And we could certainly go through a TV show and see every character in their archetypal forms and even do the I Ching emotional type on top of that. So you have that layering, that viewing of the constellations of their tapestry by connecting the dots in different ways and seeing where there's overlapping, where there's elements of focus, and where there's these distinct forms which others may share in. And all of these are interacting with each other, such as in a TV show of how are these archetypes manifesting themselves and how are they interacting with each other. And also, when they do fulfill these certain archetypal roles, right? When someone is typecasted in a role that they embody through their physical form, through their folk form, that tends to elevate that role and it becomes one of the more memorable roles in a character. Like someone who plays a king in a show having a very kingly appearance. They make that character more memorable, or a warrior, or some sort of shaman, or a doctor, whatever the role is, right? The ones that manifest that archetype elevate that role and becomes associated with that role, and it continues that feedback loop of reinforcement. But looking at these different folk forms, we can see how the spectral elements converge to make that form what it is and reverse engineer it, as well as just understand things on a different level that's more subjective and doesn't apply any moral value, doesn't apply any judgment. It's simply a way of seeing things and relating things to other things, not in rigid taxonomy, but in a way that opens the door for understanding the feel, right? The heart and soul of something. When you see something, say, this is, you have the soul of this, or you're embodying this archetype. And we're looking at that and allowing it to manifest instead of shooting it down, instead of dismissing these different ideas of folklore, of people occupying and embodying these different physiognomic archetypes. We're allowed to interact with that and we're allowed to understand things through that. Not just for human people, but for every folk, every form, every organism, and even non living organizations of systems and objects. But that is the end of the video. Thanks for watching.